there's actually more going on than that I'll present here. It's going to take a while I could spend an hour on each of these ideas, but this is going to be a very high level overview of our governance framework. I've been working on this from before we started the project for a long time. I've had lots of ideas for how decentralized governance might work. And essentially what I've done here is create what I'm calling governance primitives. And the idea is that, like building blocks, every DAO is going to be different. There's a few DAO frameworks or structures that, particularly the kind of fleet of 2017 DAO project, hard trustless DAOs. Essentially, it's a smart contract. The original DAO was a smart contract that you put money in and you use token weighted voting to decide how to spend it. And most DAO patterns since there have been some soft iterations around that idea. DAO is a decentralized system that that has an economy of some kind, and there's some consensus on how to spend the money. In my mind, I think the market's starting to wake up to this idea that it's actually a much broader concept. And the biggest piece is how you govern people in a decentralized manner using blockchain technology. So DAOs are as yet undefined. You can't say DAOs are good or bad because no one knows. There's no shared understanding of what people mean by it yet. So what we've got to do is break down what ways of working in these spaces and building out new patterns of ways of working that are radically new. So the way in which that we coordinate around a token economy or around some NFTs or use decentralized governance tools like finance.vote or use bank.vote to distribute stuff, all of this is brand new. All of this has literally never been done by humans before, because blockchains have only existed for 10, 12 years. And only very recently have they been adopted enough that the tooling has been there to make this kind of stuff possible. So obviously what we're doing is making the tooling that makes more things possible. And now we've got this extremely broad space of things that are possible. So now there's tools are becoming available. The things we are able to do and the ways that we can organize are exploding into myriad directions. There's just an amazing new ability of humans to be able to coordinate. So how I've built this is these are like building blocks. It might be that some of our DAO partners use some of these. We're using all of them. It's actually not a complete list. There's about 2 or 3 other ones that I've not added to this yet, but will be in the article. And essentially what the idea is that I'm just putting these ideas, they're like modular ideas that can be pieced together depending on what kind of DAO you've got. So this point here that DAOs are yet undefined, this is why I'm a little bit bearish on like DAO LLC type ideas, is because in order to legally represent something, you need to define it, but they are as yet undefined. We've not even begun to start defining DAOs. So we've got, like, for example, we're introducing 5 what I consider new DAO patterns. What I would recommend people do who are setting up DAOs is define what you mean by. And I would say we are a kind of DAO of DAOs. We are a DAO that makes DAOs. And we define new DAO designs and we create tools that allow people to set them up. So I've proposed like 5 different types of things here that you can do with our tools right now. So one is the token DAO, which is it's a fungible token DAO, token weighted voting. And you would use, say, bank, auction, yield, and influence in order to set one up. You've now got a governance system, you've got a liquid token, you can control the market of it, and you've done a fair launch on it. Yeah, you've got token DAO, NFT, some of the stoner cats might be in the group. That's an NFT DAO. It allows you to mint an NFT, so we've just built mint.vote. So we built the tools to be able to release NFTs into the world and then immediately turn them into governance primitives that can now be used to organize and do all the things that DAOs can do. Actually, I think is what I'm calling MFT DAO, a multi-fungible token DAO. We have both fungible token and NFTs. So this is basically a token plus NFT. And you can use it. This is why we boggle people's minds a little bit, because we're ahead of the. So we're using both tokens and NFTs. And I'll explain a little bit more how we plan on using both of those things in our DAO design. Then Tribes DAO is going to be a meta DAO, which is a DAO with mini DAOs in it. And we can even have a tokenless DAO, which would essentially just use Ethereum addresses and influence to experiment with social consensus. And you could do a huge amount, you won't have any money to spend, but you could do a huge amount of organizing without spending money with a tokenless DAO. So I'm imagining you could go to an influencer or Twitch streamer or TikToker or some, collect Ethereum addresses from their audience and immediately start using influence. And you don't even need tokens. Limitations of that, you've got no money and there's no way to exchange. Once you've done a snapshot of what the addresses are, it's very difficult to reset it. So NFTs allow you to exchange out who are the participants. But it would be a way to start it, and I still think would be a DAO. All of these things are not articulated or defined by anyone yet. We'll spend time as a community defining what our DAO is using these primitives in the near future. Feel free to jump in at any point, by the way. I'm just going to chat away on these things, but if you've got any comments, just jump in. So the thing about governance is governance itself is a kind of slippery term. You can look it up in the dictionary. It's like governance is the act of governing. And if you look up governing, you get governance. It's a circular term that is not like fully defined in itself. People have been talking about it for 4,000 years. And so what governance is to me is basically a set of rules that enables people to work in a collaborative fashion. And there's ways in which of constructing these rules that are useful or more optimal than others for social coordination. One of the key principles is this idea of innovation capture. And this is based on kind of empirical work based out of like real organizations. If you chart innovation, now for me, I'm presuming, since we're at the bleeding edge of technology, in as yet completely undefined technological space, it's like the new world, right? You can conceptualize the crypto space as the new world. We've just landed in the new world. We're looking for gold. We don't know where it is. And you don't know what the rules of this new world are, even what can be done. So innovation has got to be one of the top priorities. So prioritize innovation, but prioritize the capture of it. So in organizations, you can either set extremely rigid rules, so you can have a very ordered system where you can only do X. So basically, like Bitcoin is on the very, very ordered DAO spectrum. I think I consider Bitcoin a DAO. And you can't do anything in it other than mine Bitcoin or alter the UTXO set and transfer Bitcoin. And consequently, there is not as much innovation in Bitcoin as there is elsewhere. It does what it does. So your kind of organization that would have extremely ordered rules are things like production line organizations. They make stuff and they just churn it out. On the other side of the spectrum, you let everyone do whatever they want to do. So pure anarchy. It's like everyone can do exactly what they want. What tends to happen is the organization itself can't capture any innovation on both ends of these things. This is actually slightly higher on the side. But if everyone can do what they want and everyone is innovating, the organization doesn't capture it. So what we need to do is create rules. So we need two things: a kind of upgradable rule set, and we need an information structure for essentially roughly the same thing that allows people to understand what is possible, what the rules are. You need to empower people. So how I've described this in the article is you can have the best suggestion box in the world, but if you don't empower people to make suggestions, you won't get any. And this is a huge problem in DAOs at the moment. you'll have most of them of, okay, make a proposal. And the proposal can be absolutely anything. Consequently, people just ask for money for just arbitrary stuff, and just it's generally just really bad. So what you want to be doing is building structures that iterate between kind of order and chaos like this. So you've got to iterate and optimize for innovation capture. I'll elaborate more on that in the article, but it's also based on this correlated idea, which is search and optimize. Now, you can conceptualize all the possible things that we can do in crypto as a topography, as a kind of terrain that we have yet to explore. So if you can imagine, you start off on this kind of like flat bit and you start doing stuff. You start searching around and you like, maybe just market research, essentially. We think we should do this. So an example of this is our kind of yield thing, like liquidity mining is one of these things, right? Someone's discovered liquidity mining is a thing. It allows you to do decentralized exchange liquidity. You can incentivize people in tokens to do it. You could stop here and think you've nailed it. But if you keep searching, you'll find you're on a hill. The goal is to keep optimizing. So you don't know if there's another hill over here. You might be on this one and you might think this is the top, but actually you have to go down a little bit to go up a little bit. The sort of theory behind this, it's based on a complexity thinking idea called explore and exploit. And it's the idea of once you're in a kind of innovation track that you think is good, that you keep moving around. So this is what we will do. I consider the peaks that we found are our dApps. So let's call this bank, yield, this is influence, and a good governance system. Okay, we're at the top of a peak. We've cracked that one, right? So we'll leave it at that for a bit, knowing full well that there might be a yield product with a peak over here. And we need the governance system for someone to be able to say, hey, there's another way of doing yield, version 3.0, that's even better. And because you've got to go down and up this trough, you've got to rebuild it. There's work to be done to get there. We have to go backwards before we go forwards. So if you imagine what we can do is a terrain like this, we need a system to be able to know when we're on a peak, allow new people to suggest, hey, there's a peak over here. Now, this is one of the things that Dows will be able to do better than conventional organizations. We might have tens of thousands of people eventually exploring this landscape. We've already got a lot of people. So there might be people saying, hey, there's this project over here doing this that have discovered this peak. We should do something similar. We need a system for people to be able to say, hey, we're here, but I think we'll get to here if we make this change. Then we need a vote on it to say, yeah, okay, let's do it. Let's decide if this is a good idea and move around on it. So a good decentralized governance system will allow the system to be able to run forever in perpetuity. It won't like get to a point and die because it will always upgrade itself. So we will have moments of searching and optimizing. I would say for the last year, we've been in this very divergent phase. We've been around searching this complex terrain for a number of good things. And now I think we found 6 peaks that I think are very interesting. And now what we're going to do is optimize them, which is let's get these 6 dApps to the absolute best that they can be as a collaboration. And then when we feel like we've absolutely smashed them and they're working brilliantly, we'll start searching again. And the idea is that you would iterate through these different phases when you wanted to do that. So you have moments of, this is what we're working on. All right, these are all working great. Everyone go and do whatever they want for a bit. Go around and search around. Go look for some new peaks. And it means that we can have an open-ended number of dApps. So where I imagine this going is that we've got a DAO that funds open-ended exploration of the crypto space. We can have 100 dApps in the end, 1,000. I don't know. What we need is a mechanism to allow people to go and search this space capture new people in order to do it, pay them properly for it, and have a treasury management system that facilitates it happening. Is everyone with me so far? Slightly conceptual stuff. So how do you, once you're on a peak, how do you behave on there? I'm suggesting another governance primitive, which is test, iterate, ossify. So what we've got is we're in the searching phase here. We let's test repeatedly. So those of you who've been around for the last year or so have watched us do this out in the open. You've been testing the products with us. You've been seeing the products be built live in development. This again is something different than you would get in the Web 2 world, where essentially the product is released, bang, it's out in the open. That's what's marketed. That's what it is. You get it. And then there's some centralized company that, without your control or without your engagement, without your feedback, goes and then releases a version 2 at a later date. You've got nothing to say or do with it. However, we do this live. So we make and test out in the open. We do testnet. So one of the things I'll be suggesting, the goal of these things is that other DAOs might want to use these ideas as well. And a good practice that we've discovered is that we launch dApps on a testnet first. Everyone plays out in these things. Everyone gets incentivized to carry out these tests and work together on them. They're built with people out in the open. Eventually you get one on mainnet. You monitor the performance of it. We're doing this with the data science work at the moment. So Markets 2.0 is a great example of this. We're about to do Markets 2.0. And the second iteration of that, we need a governance framework. We need our governance to be able to capture the ideas from the crowd so that they're empowered to iterate this to version 2 and it's better. So, and I think, let's say we find a new version of Markets 2.0. It's brilliant. Everyone loves it. It's got tunable parameters that allow us to change it around by governance. And this process, bit of a weird word, ossification. It's a thing that's used in, so Bitcoin, for example, its code base is ossifying, which means it becomes more and more automated. It means that there's less and less human involvement in its relationship, in its operation, and eventually it just runs. A perfectly ossified, decentralized system will run whether humans are involved with it or not. So I think Yield 2.0 is a good example of this. We've created a set of contracts that essentially just run without our intervention. And eventually we're going to have that linked to influence. It's run by governance vote. I think that hanging things less to do are just create a simple funding mechanism that's linked to the treasury. And it just runs. There's no more, it's ossified. It's now a dApp it's there forever, basically. Once something's on the blockchain, as long as it's funded, it'll run forever. And that's the goal. Now, what might happen is that we realize that there's another peak somewhere that needs this to, and we'll open up the job again and go back here and go through this kind of searching process. So that's another governance primitive. Are we in the testing phase? Are we in the iteration phase? Are we in the ossification phase? And we'll be able to label each of our dApps to say which area of development we're in. It'll signal out to the community. Do we need testers? Do we need users? Or is it just fixed now? In which case, we're just going to go and tell the world about it and try and get people to use it. All right, the next idea.
Can I ask a question, Nick?
Of course, man. Yeah.
Is that a bit like agile for DAOs? But obviously you need to reframe that. But is it that sort of?
Yeah. So other people, I've explained some of these ideas to people over the years, and people said, "Are you trying to come up with agile for DAOs?" I don't like agile, so I'm not. But yes. Yeah. No. Exactly. You can conceptualize these ideas as different phases of work. Agile is very linear. So there's like waterfall, which is very linear, sequential thing. Agile is something in between. It's much more of a project management type thing. But yeah, these ideas you could conceptualize as something like agile DAOs. These are like principles that form the framework of it. This idea, I think, is important. There's people contesting this, like right now. Someone just released an article on this being a bad idea, and I disagree. What I'm calling the way that our token economics will develop is adoption-based token economics. We're working in finite token supplies. There's currently 50, 60 million tokens in the Uniswap pool. We started with 1 billion tokens, and we've burnt around 3 million of them by selling our FETIDs. So the idea is, if you think about those IDs that were sold over that time, the amount of tokens that were burnt was directly proportional to adoption and what people were willing to pay to adopt into the network. And I think this is a really underexplored and important way for DAOs to capture economic bandwidth. So I'm frequently asked, what's your business model? And I say we don't have one because we're not a business. We're a DAO. And people haven't quite got their heads around this. So I've said, right, our FETIDs are this. Believe in the token. You'd be surprised how many projects out there give their token away. It's nothing because they don't even believe in it. Like, they're actually boggled by the idea that people will buy it out of the market because they think it's just some random funny money they've just made out of thin air. And you'll see other projects extracting value out of the ecosystem. So we've been offered lots of money to set up DAOs for people. And how much will it cost us to set up a yield pool, for example? And we could literally ask them for, give us $10,000 and then we'll set it up for you. We don't do that. Everything that we do will have a model that economic bandwidth is channeled into the token economy. And the best way to do that is by having for that directly to impact on the supply and demand relationship within it. So I think Vitalik said something like this years ago. I think he influenced me on this. He said every good token economy will have sinks and holes. There'll be holes where tokens come out of and sinks where they disappear into. And that's what we've got. Inflation and deflation in a kind of cyclical process. We are inflating the token supply through bank and yield and deflating the token supply through adoption, through our apps. So it's a buy back and burn type thing, except we're not buying back and burning the tokens because we're not intermediating it. So users are spending the tokens to use the dApps. And I think will be proved out to be a very interesting way of managing a decentralized suite of applications like this. Anyone got any questions on that? I'll keep going. The other is a program. Every DAO should have a program. And I've watched DAOs for many years, and they all have this kind of similar problem of essentially coordination issues. There's people who've been there for a long time. They know how everything works, but the new people who come in don't. And there needs to be a process, and it's part of this sort of loops back to this one. You need to have, in order to get people to innovate in your DAO, you need to empower and educate those people. So we will constantly, as far as I'm concerned, from now on, it might eventually won't be me running it all, because this is not going to be teaching 5 days a week, but you guys will have to come and take over at some point and do more stuff in it. But you can imagine this turning into a perpetually running program that people can tune in and out of, understand the DAO. Eventually, we're going to have to start doing kind of reruns where there's new people in the DAO, and all of a sudden they need to know what all the apps are. And the strategy for this, I'm exploring this idea of what I'm calling periodization. And in a conventional organization, if you're the boss, you can call a meeting whenever you want. You can email your team and say, look, meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. in my office, or next Tuesday at this time, I want everyone to be here. And you can do that because of the power dynamic. The people that you are managing have to be there because you're the boss. And in DAOs, there are no bosses. So what we need is, I'm calling it social shelling points, but shelling point is a focal point. my vision for this is that you can see that each of the days in our program have a theme. Strategy Monday, Focus Tuesday, Creativity Wednesday, Communication Thursday, Community Friday. Now, what we're doing is time boxing each of those days to have a specific theme. So we do strategy on Monday, and that is we're going to decide what we're going to do this week on the Monday. On Tuesday, we do it. We get our heads down, get the work that we set ourselves to do, quiet time, minimal Discord activity. We're not there to distract ourselves too much. It's for getting stuff done. Research, activity stuff. Wednesday is our let's do the searching part of our search and optimize bit. Let's imagine the kind of stuff that we can do. Let's think about partnerships. Let's think about expanding our minds and imagining what's possible with everything that we've got. Open space, divergent thinking. Thursday, communication. So this is like each week we communicate what we've done in the last week or what is coming. And it creates a kind of focal point for us to actively communicate to the community week in, week out, every week. And then Friday is very community focused. This is where we want community members to step up, get involved. I think we should have blank spaces in here for community members to be able to say, hey, can I have 3 hours on the program next week or 2 hours on the program next week and do this thing? This is the space for it. But the idea is that instead of, we want to land on a pattern where the same thing happens week in, week out. And then eventually you don't even need to look at the program because the community call is at 2 p.m. on Friday, UTC, because it's always there. And this kind of pattern or periodization is the way in which everyone just gets on the same page. Everyone's going to be juggling dozens of Dows. If they've got a structure in time that people get used to, they're more likely to be able to aggregate communities, I think. So we're in the program right now. It's one of the things that we're doing. Okay, this is where it gets interesting. Another primitive that I'm suggesting is the pyramid. So the second phase of our network, which in my mind, different people have had different ideas of when this has started, but in my mind, it starts on the 18th of November. It's the kind of it's a 1-year anniversary. And what this is, a classic, the most basic organizational primitive is the pyramid. Every organization basically in the world has some elements of this in it. They sometimes pretend that they don't, but they always do. I've seen Dows say, we don't have any hierarchical power. We are a completely flat organization, and they aren't. They're either deluded or they're lying. There's always a pyramid of power. What's different is whether you articulate it. It is demonstrably the case that I have more power than others in this DAO because the ideas that are here are coming out of my head in the first instance. There's always originators of ideas. So Yuvi, Naomi, myself, we are in this kind of and people like Matt and Chris who are in here are at different levels of the new DAO member who's just popped into our Discord through the Start Here button. That is always going to be the case. So how do DAOs deal with that? And that is, you say, this is what the power structure is. This is the different levels. And this is how you can ascend up through them. So this is our pyramid. There are different levels and classes of members in the DAO, depending on what your degree of engagement is. I'll start at the top. So the Senate is a group of selected DAO leaders. This acts as a kind of what you would call a locus of control. Some DAOs think that they can be absolutely decentralized from day one, and that is impossible. You can't do it. There has to be coordinated forces that stop crazy shit from happening. There will be many DAOs that blow up and die because they think they can pass over full token control of the smart contracts and the treasury over to a group of random pseudonymous people. And it's a bad idea. For a period of time at least, and there is no DAO that's cracked this yet without exposing themselves to crazy risk, there needs to be a group of people who can say, hold on a minute, stop. That's going to kill the DAO. All DAOs are exposed to extreme blow-up risk. If you have them completely open, anyone can do anything. it won't be long before someone passes a proposal that's utterly stupid or dangerous to the DAO and blows everything up. So for a period of time, there is a coordinated group that has veto rights that essentially says, okay, we're going to get involved as minimal amount as possible, but we're putting ourselves in a point where we can put a stop to stuff if it absolutely gets silly. But we are answerable to the rest of we're going to be fully transparent about all of the decisions made. And there is an argument this is some degree of centralization. In fact, it just is. And the goal at some point is that this will, in the third phase, disappear. And then what we're left with is a distributed group of people who have leadership responsibility in the DAO, entirely recruited from the community. So at some point, I'm in the Senate, but when the Senate disappears, I'll be a DAO leader like everyone else. So who this is, at the moment, for example, the Senate will have the kind of responsibilities for deciding who they are. Eventually, we'll be able to do this by a token-weighted voting thing. Who should be elevated to DAO leader based on the contributions that they've done. There's different levels within this. There's DAO leader and senior DAO leader, and DAO leaders they are given a stipend. These are people who are working quite considerable long hours so should be given payment like it's a fairly conventional job. It's not conventional at all. We're still outlaws in the kind of weird decentralized world. But necessarily there needs to be a consistent income that they can trust to be there that isn't going to get wrecked through market moves. If Ethereum crashes to $1,000 tomorrow, everyone's tokens in the entire space go down 70%. There's no way that you can mitigate that. It's one of the biggest issues with the crypto space. Everything is tied to the major cryptocurrencies. So there should be some safety net, and in order to gain one of those, you essentially become a DAO leader, and we'll make clear what the application processes are. We have finite numbers of spaces because we pay people a stable coin amount every month to hang around with us, come to our team meetings, come to the strategy meetings, and be just around. So very limited number of spaces to start with. Like I said earlier, I hope there to be hundreds of DAO leaders in this DAO in the future. Okay, another one. This is a complete idea that we're going to be launching in a couple of weeks. I think you'll like it. The Parliament is going to be a group of mini DAOs that exist inside the finance.vote economy. And each of them will have their own treasury, and each of them will have their own NFT series. So we've been working with an absolutely amazing artist for the past, I think it's getting on for 6 months now. We've been going back and forth on designs, and each of these, there will be 6 new NFT series, 6 new NFT ID series. These will be like senior IDs within the systems, and it's like a political party system. So if you look at the political party systems, so like in the UK, there's the Green Party here or whatever. There's let's say, the Labour Party, Conservative Party or whatever. These are pluralistic parties, so they're different, have different focuses on the market. We'll release who they are, but we will have a Galaxy Brain Party, we will have a Degen Party, and a few others, which I'll release at a later date. But you get the idea. Galaxy Brains are going to be focused on technology. The Degens are going to be focused on being. What will happen is we will release these new NFTs using our continuous auction. There is a fee in FVT, but this time not everything goes. You'll pay an Ether for them. There's an FVT fee, which is burnt, like the original IDs, but the remaining Ether will go into a DAO treasury, a mini DAO treasury. So the Degens will have their own pot of money that they can spend on whatever they want within the sort of parameters of what the DAO sets. And the goal is to give these different groups of people an influence within the DAO, and essentially it's another part of the governance structure. Anyone got any questions on that? I consider that slightly separate, in that what we're doing here is emitting DAOs. If the FVT DAO is this kind of main DAO and it's got its pyramid style structure in here, we release DAOs into the world. Where if we crack London DAO, for example, that's completely on its own now. Doesn't need to fall within our governance framework. It's not a DAO if it's not autonomous. Now, London DAO could decide if it wants to be part of our wider ecosystem, and there could be DAOs that want to join the parliament. I don't know. But we will launch, incubate, release DAOs into the world that then just are on their own, basically. And we have alliances with them.
Gotcha. Thanks.
So then we've got the citizens, anyone holding a citizen's ID, and they will be able to vote very much like citizens in a conventional democracy. They'll have a vote, that kind of thing. They will also, it's a direct democracy. So every citizen will be able to make a proposal, which the parliament will review. And the DAO leaders will help put into action. They will facilitate put into action. And Senate essentially will, to start with, have sign-off approval on those proposals, stop anything mad happening. Token holders will be able to signal with their FVT which peaks and troughs or which peaks of innovation we should be working on. They can vote exactly like their citizens. Every citizen will be a token holder. They have to be to get an ID. But they will be able to influence the amount of voting power they've got as citizens. And they will be able to signal with their token balances what apps we should work on. So if you imagine like an FVT holder will be able to say, I really like the yield app. I like influence. I'm into bank and I'm not that bothered about markets, for example. So I'll give that a small amount. So they'll be able to apportion their FVT by signaling power to say what they want the DAO to work on without having to get involved in the nitty-grittiness of the governance. They'll come in and once a year, once every 6 months, signal with their tokens what aspects of DAO work they want us to work on. And we'll try and entice them in to come and get involved in DAO governance, but they can absolutely just sit back and enjoy the ride if they don't want to. At the lowest level, we've got the tribes, and this is basically tribes DAO. With this, we will have the hotline to the dog coiners and the various other tribes in there, and we will essentially learn from the tribes what's going on in the wider crypto space and use that as part of our search and exploration activity. So this is the next phase of the network, and it launches in a small number of weeks. Parliament IDs will be released as soon as the artists finish them. They're all going to be hand-drawn, one-of-one pieces. There's going to be 6 times 100 NFTs. There will only be 100 of each. We'll be able to have votes to open up so for example, like in the real world, we'll be able to have votes on who gets the bigger share of essentially the democracy, the government, if you like. And yeah, they're coming out soon. But this is basically will be put into practice over the next few weeks. Going to stop there a second. Any other thoughts or comments?
I've got one question. Sorry if that was explained already, but what's citizen ID?
A citizen ID is in our markets application. In order to be able to vote in vote markets, you have to mint an ID. We call them citizen IDs. So they're the kind of passport into our decentralized democracy. Once you've got one, you get voting rights, and yeah, it's a kind of NFT voting passport, if you like. And we've been issuing them for a year. We've issued about 700 of them.
Okay, that explains a lot. Thank you.
No worries.
Nick, I have another question for you. If someone has a Parliament ID and they sell that NFT on the secondary market, what happens to the rights associated with that?
They transfer with the ID. So yeah, we've got some choices there. I think the starting point is every NFT in the parliament will have voting rights. There may even be reputation assigned to them. So they'll be bought out of an auction. And let's say you buy a degen ID, and that gives you, basically we'll give them jobs. Like, what do degens do? They buy dog coins. They do all the utterly degen stuff. I think the DAO needs to know that part of the market. In many ways, the degens are the insight on the future of the crypto space. So they'll be given things like their own vote market. So what's the degen token list? And they'll be able to earn fees from people betting on that. So they have this kind of like seniority. They represent that outlook on the market. We'll also have like DeFi apes. We'll have apes in there as well, who are like, they're into yield games and long-term, slightly longer-term investment, etc., etc. You may accrue reputation on that, and as far as I'm concerned, you should be able to sell it, but it'll be up to the parliament in the future to decide if it stays like that. Yeah, Max has asked, can you be in multiple mini DAOs? Yeah, you buy into all 6, so it'll be like the ID auctions. There'll be 6 parallel ID auctions happening, all released at once. Each one will have its own token gated room. You can buy into all 6 if you want and get the full visibility of it. And each will come with its own rights and perks and all this sort of stuff. And it will be a kind of exclusive bunch to start with. Cool. Any other questions? I've got one final thing. It's slightly the most mind-bending thing that I'm about to talk about. And that is semantic governance. So this loops back to our original conversation here about innovation capture and searching and optimizing and all these sort of bits. In order to be able to, so most DAOs at the moment, the contemporary paradigm is you use Discord to chat in, you use Discourse, which is a forum tool to work up proposals, and then you use a voting tool, Snapshot. Sooner or later, everyone will be using Influence, and then a voting tool to vote on it. We are integrating that whole forum piece, Discourse, into Influence. And soon we'll have a kind of new application we're undecided whether to actually call it proposal.vote as a separate thing or have it more tightly integrated. But for me, the major problem with DAO governance at the moment is anyone can suggest anything. And blank slate governance, there is no organization in the world where a random person can walk off the street, go straight to the key decision-making entity and say, I think we should do this. And it's completely different to whatever the organization does. It's if someone walked into Cadbury's chocolate factory and said, I think we should make electric vehicles. But that's currently what DAO governance is. There is a blank proposal space that anyone can propose anything, regardless of scope or nature of the DAO. Some DAOs have very tight focusing on. MakerDAO is one of the ones where this isn't the case. You can actually only vote on very small parameter changes that make it into their sort of governor alpha module. And that's because their governance smart contracts are very limited in what they can do. Publish a new smart contract upgrade, for example. But ours, we want to be able to explore the entire crypto space. We can do absolutely anything. But what we need to do is define the scope of what we can and can't do right now. And the way in which we do that is what I'm calling semantic governance, which is essentially an approach to characterizing the decision space that we can operate within. I'm going to give you the starting tags. We'll be able to modify these. These are not fixed yet. It's just the ideas that we've come up with to start with. So what you're doing is defining the scope of what can and will be done. You can describe anything with what's called a semantic triple, with 3 semantic tags. And a semantic tag is just, you could basically call it a hashtag. So, for example, hashtag dApps instantly tells you that we're talking about the dApps. If I say hashtag dApps, hashtag yield, now we know what dApp we're talking about. And if I say hashtag yield, hashtag token economics, We now know very specifically what we're talking about. And now I can say, change the pulse length to 2,000 blocks. And maybe because, right? And what that has done is lens our concentration on what we're talking about down to a very specific thing very quickly. And this is how I intend for us to do our proposal structures. And the way I imagine this working out, I'll share this with you. I've shared it a long time ago, actually, in the Telegram chat. But essentially, this is how it will look. The process is as follows. Everything starts with the community. The community will define its principles, what we will and won't do. So the community, we did this thing called the embassy. This is now called the parliament. The DMF was what we were originally calling our governance minimised fund. Might end up like that
day
again.
In the Highlands today. We've got a bit of a breeze. We'll keep the midges out.
All right.
Play batteries
hashtag
to
community,
actually power it up, and it doesn't come with everything else it comes
hashtag
with.
culture.
The drone itself is a little folding drone, and the grandkids call these floppy dog ears, which I think is a good name for these propellers.
Principles.
So they flop out the way so it can make it into a nice little unit.
What's our direction?
HD camera that's tiltable, but you have to tilt it before you take off.
These will all
These
be
are actually still movable, so they don't lock in position. The back ones.
Who are we? What direction do we want to go in? What's our focus? How do we represent ourselves? What will we do? What won't we do? These are the things that I want us to be able to propose, start off with. Then there's a whole bucket of stuff, which is essentially the technology. Eventually, we want a system where someone can propose a new DApp, and they will need to fill out a structure, let's say apply for a grant. I want to make a new .vote app. This is the concept, this is the token economics, this is the design, and this is how we'll build it. This is also how we navigate the current dApps. So this was like hashtag yield, hashtag token economics, change the utility of the token, change how the token is governed, change the blockchain architecture. So you might say yield, let's go to Binance Smart Chain with it. And the proposal is hashtag yield, hashtag blockchain, let's go to Binance Smart Chain. Now what this does is give us essentially Senate will set what hashtags are possible to make proposals about. And this will focus all our decision making within a framework that stops us running off in random directions. There's nothing worse than people wasting their time. So what we don't want is people saying, oh, I've got this brilliant idea, let's go and do this. And it's just completely outside of the scope of what the DAO is currently working on. And they've wasted their time drawing up something that was never going to be actioned in the first place. But what this allows us to do is define our decision making, what we will and won't do. And the sort of final idea is this idea of governance optimization. There's a huge thing in this space around governance minimization. Everyone still thinks this is the thing that all blockchain governance tend to. I disagree. You should be able to unpick your rules and remake them if you're at a dead end. And unless Bitcoin can figure out how to do this, or unless it gets memed into being digital gold, it will get stuck at a dead end and other blockchains will overtake it. My thinking is a governance optimization approach, which is this kind of loop. The community decides what it does. We build some technology. We go and take it out to the world. So the signal bit is the final bit, which is let's go and tell the world about it. How do we tell the world? What's our distribution? Do the users like it? And then we learn from that whole cycle and then upgrade all the rules through optimization periodically. So everything I've just described here is up for grabs. Any of it can be changed at some point in the future. We run it for a bit. We see how it works. Maybe it's a quarter. Maybe it's every month or even every year. I don't know. But everything is able to change if it needs to be changed. I'll release an article on this that sort of describes it all in the next week. I know there's a lot to take in. I've been thinking about this stuff for a very long time, and it's going to be quite difficult it's going to take a while to soak in. But there was a lot of stuff there. Has anyone got any questions or thoughts? Do we like the direction going in? Any feedback?
Yeah, like you said, there's a lot to take in, but for me, that feels really strong direction, and I think it's going to set the tone? Because that's the nature of crypto, is you can copy the person that's doing the best, and well, just of everything, I suppose, actually. And I feel like we're going to set that agenda.
Yeah, I've designed it to be copied. It's an open source framework, and it's the governance primitive. It's not copy our smart contracts. It's copy this idea. Here's how we do the program. Why don't you try it in your DAO? This is our approach to this test, iterate, ossify idea. We'll have details and documentation about how to do that, how it's worked for us, why it's safer for the users, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's each of these ideas. Some of them might work for other DAOs, some of them might not. I don't know. But yeah, they're open source ideas. They're to be copied. And yeah, so these are the kind of things that I think will make for good decentralized governance, particularly the semantic governance idea. I think that is a way of getting that innovation capture. It means you don't have to write a 5,000 word proposal with all of this stuff in. It means you can write a proposal in 2 sentences and say, I think we should do this. And eventually we'll be able to just vote on all the active proposals, and we'll have a list of them, and you pick the ones that get the most votes and do. Any other thoughts?
What do you think is going to be the most either complex or challenging part to implement?
It's probably the semantic governance thing. It's an entirely new idea for how to govern. It's not a small idea. It's going to take a while to process. Remember, I worked in meats-based governance for many years. I think that kind of idea could be used to empower entire organizations to think differently about the way. It's a big idea. I don't know if it's going to work out the gate. I think there's a lot of development to do on it. I think there's a lot of education to do on it. But I think we'll always be a very progressive DAO. There's no, we're always going to be at the doing stuff that other DAOs aren't doing. That's just what it'll be. We're always going to be trying things that others aren't. And there's what I think it will make us as a DAO is an approach to governance that is genuinely novel, genuinely different to what the many DAOs are just run like organizations, just like traditional businesses, with a very hierarchical power structure that's essentially hidden. What they've got is a business with a token attached to it and some kind of fairly meaningless votes that happen every now and again. And what this is an effort to genuinely empower the people in this DAO to be able to step up and change it. We've made it if someone can come in and in a short period of time figure out what we're doing, make some changes, and actually materially change the way that the DAO runs. That's what you want. So hierarchies always exist, but in traditional hierarchies, the people at the bottom are powerless. They don't get to influence the decision making. Even one step up, you have to climb the greasy pole, get up the ladder, and then when you're on the next ladder, there's another rung above you, but your power is located to your level in it. Whereas here, anyone can ascend their way to the top of the organization. And you don't need to, and ideally, you don't need to be rich in order to do it. We need mechanisms that allow smaller token holders to be able to ascend these power structures. And a big part of this is that most DAOs out there, most people are completely disempowered. They don't have enough tokens in order to influence anything. Like, you have to be a fund in order to influence a DAO, typically. So a lot of what this is building more inclusive approaches to bringing in a wider group of people to DAO business. Throw in any other comments? I have to go fairly soon. Stick them in the general if I'm missing anything.
Yeah, Nick?
Yes. Hey.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So, are you in this article that you're gonna put out in the next few days or next week? Are you going to address everything that you just presented? So, all the primitives plus the governance framework, everything, or just part of it?
Everything. So the governance framework, there's going to be like 12 sections, and you can read them one at a time. You can take one, use it, critique it. I want people to pull it apart, give me feedback. But yeah, absolutely. The idea, the way it's written so far, and I did it slightly more visually today, it's mostly done, rather than me just give you a big article. Yeah, there'll be 10, 12 sections in there. Each will have a few paragraphs and a couple of visuals explaining what it's all about.
Okay. So it sounds very interesting, very ambitious. I'm really looking forward to reading the whole thing.
Thanks, man. I'm intrigued to what you think of it so far at the high level. Have you got any initial thoughts?
Yeah, I've done. When we last talked, I think I did mention to you. I've done some work in with Edgeware, which is a Polkadot based chain that has strong focus on governance as well. And it was interesting for me to actually. Thanks for letting me know about this meeting. Till a couple of days ago, I wasn't aware. And what I like about it is it seems to me that you picked up several things that from what I've seen have been working in different protocols, and it put this together in a structured way that seems very ambitious, very interesting. And so while you were presenting, there's several questions that came to my mind. Yeah, but I'm sure this was just an initial framework, and there's a lot of potential there. So I'm really interested in looking into this in more detail and hopefully contributing as well.
Yeah, great. No, this is the idea. We want people to contribute, and it won't be fixed. And all of these ideas are just starting ideas, and very much intend on developing this with everyone here. Mm-hmm. And anyone else. Yeah, and I thought one of the things you might be interested in is the notion of the pyramid idea is it's controversial. It's practically sacrilege in the DAO world to say there's a hierarchy explicitly. Many of them say actually the very principle of a DAO is that they're flat systems. Mm-hmm. And what I think they're doing is just papering over hidden power structures. So, what we're doing here is overtly saying that there is a power structure, and that is in essence actually a little bit risky. But yeah, I think that I'd love to bounce those. I'd let you stew on that a little bit and see what you think about that and how we represent those ideas properly.
Awesome, very happy to do it. Yeah, thanks.
Excellent. Okay, any other questions? I'm running out of time a little bit. Yeah, that's going about 5 minutes. Any other thoughts or comments? I'm sure I saw a message come up somewhere, but I don't know which channel it landed in. Has anyone seen a question that I've yet to answer? Okay, cool. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it's got you thinking. Recognise that there's an awful lot of stuff going on in there. It'll all become clear. Everything that we've designed here will, I'm hoping, be evident once it's put into practice. Some of it already is. The program idea is something that we've been doing for 5 or 6 weeks now, and we'll continue to do. The new proposal structures will get booted into practice over the next couple of weeks as well. So yeah, have a stew on it. Drop me a note if you have any thoughts, and we'll talk again next week.